If you love a really soft, wholesome whole wheat breads, then this is the video for you because I'm gonna walk you through the steps to make a sourdough honey oat whole wheat sandwich bread. This bread is so delicious that my husband even said that it tasted like what the store brand Milton's tastes like. So I'm mixing the whole wheat flour and the bread flour with just the water and letting that autolyze. With whole wheat breads, it's really helpful to give it a head start on Autolyse for it to be even softer and more moist later. A special part for this one is I make a mixture with hot water, some quick oats, and honey. And I mix those up into a honey oat soaker that I let sit on the side until I add it later. After the initial Autolyse, I add my milk. I added the milk later because it was really hot. I would recommend adding the milk and the water together. Because I delayed adding my milk, it took a little while to incorporate because the gluten formation had already started forming with the water and the flour. So once that milk was in there, mixed, and then I added my active sourdough starter. So I mixed that in. It takes a little bit longer to mix in the starter if you delay it after the initial Autolyse of the flour and the water, but I highly recommend it because it's going to give your bread a better rise and better crumb, especially if you're making whole wheat breads. This is usually how I do it. It's really helpful for white breads as well. By delaying adding the starter, the gluten actually has a better chance to develop even more strength and more elasticity. And with whole wheat bread, because you have so much whole wheat in there, it will impact how much the bread can expand and grow in the gluten development. So it's helpful to use these tips and tricks to get the best possible final bread. Then I added my salt with a little bit more water to make sure that salt would incorporate well. So after another 30 minutes, I mix in the honey oat soaker. The dough is really wet and beautiful, smells so good. I like to use my hands to make sure I feel the dough at different points to make sure all the ingredients are fully incorporated before I put it into the fermentation bin. So I'm putting this into a 6-quart Cambro here, and this is where it will sit, and I'll be able to visually gauge how my fermentation is going and if it's done. So after your dough is in that bin, it's going to ferment at room temperature. This is the bulk fermentation stage, and it's going to stay in here for 5 to 7 hours. After it ferments, you should see a smoother appearance on the dough. You see a double in volume, and it should, when you touch the dough, it should not stick to your fingers. It should be a little bit tacky because it's still unbaked dough, but it shouldn't be overly sticky. So now that my dough is fermented, I'm going to take all the dough out of the container and put it on an unfloured surface. For your recipe in the post link down below, that's for 1 loaf of bread. In this video, you see that I'm making actually 2 loaves of bread. So I'm doing one extra step here. I'm separating or dividing the dough into 2 equal halves. So once your dough is out, it's time to pre-shape it. And that is when we take a dough scraper or bench knife, and you're going to either fold 1/2 over or cinch in the sides so you have a round ball of dough. So here you see that I'm just, on the first half, I'm cinching in the sides, just kind of pushing it, using that counter pressure, counter tension of the unfloured countertop to make this into a tight ball. The second one, I'm flipping the 1/2 over, trying to create a smooth top and then tightening it after that. Your goal is you just want to work with trying to find a smooth top of your dough and tightening it into that ball-like shape. It doesn't have to be perfect. This shouldn't take you too long. You don't want to wrestle with your dough. Try to do this without too much handling of the dough because if you put your dough scraper hands on too much, they will start sticking to the dough. So quick little movements work best. And then after it's pre-shaped into a ball, let it sit for about 20 minutes to bench rest before your final shape. Before you do your final shaping, make sure you prepare a loaf pan. I like to line mine with parchment paper. I'll link a video here for how I line it with parchment paper. For the final shaping, I dust the top of my dough with a little bit of flour, enough that when I rub it into the top of the dough, I don't feel any stickiness of the dough itself, but not so much that there's layers and layers of flour, because when I flip it over, I want only a minimal amount on the counter. Now we're gonna flip our dough over, gently pull and stretch it until it's about a square. The flour side is down. It should be stretchy and move with you as you stretch it out. Now that my square shape, I'm gonna take the top 2 corners away from me and I'm gonna fold them into the center so that the top half of my dough looks like a triangle. And then I'm gonna take the tip of that triangle, fold it into the center, take the 2 outside halves of my dough and fold them inside to meet that triangle in the middle of the dough. And finally, I'm going to fold the dough over towards me and create a seam by either pinching or hitting at the heel of my hand. And this is when I want to give it some more tension before I put it in my loaf pan. So use a dough scraper bench knife to tighten it around the edges so it's a really nice tight loaf of bread. You should see a little bit of bubbles forming under the top layer of the dough, and that's a really good sign that you have a nice tight shape. And then transfer it into your loaf pan with the seam side down. So I'm shaping my second loaf the same way. And my final step is once my loaf is in the loaf pan, I'm going to cover it with a shower cap. This can proof at room temperature, but I'm choosing to do a cold proof in the fridge. So both of my loaves are going into the fridge where they're going to stay in there for 12 up to 16 hours. So after that time in the fridge, it's time to preheat the oven. So I'm doing my manual steaming method and I'm going to preheat it to 500 degrees. And if you want to learn how I do the manual steaming for baking sandwich loaves and breads like this, you can see this video that I've linked here, or that's linked down below. Once my oven is preheated after 20 to 30 minutes and it's nice and steamy, I take my loaves out of the fridge and I uncover them. The tops have a little bit of stickiness or condensation from being in the fridge. So in order to create the best score, I'm gonna add a little layer of flour where I plan to score the dough. So gentle sprinkling of flour, and I'm gonna rub it in, and I'm gonna create a very thin crescent type score along one side of each top of the dough. So cut in a little bit, and what my goal is for it to fold open like a lid for when it goes into the hot, steamy oven. Now I have both my breads scored. I'm gonna put both of them in the steamy oven, and I like to add an extra burst of steam with a water spray bottle. I'm gonna turn down the temperature to 450 degrees and bake them for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I remove the steam pan. If your steam pan is too full of water and you're not able to move it, please make sure you crack your oven so that steam can escape and the oven just stays hot. So it's gonna bake in here at 450 degrees for 12 to 15 minutes. The bake QC here was for 15 minutes. Once my loaves are baked, I'm going to take them out of the oven, let them sit, and then once they're more cool to handle, I'm going to take off that parchment line and let them cool. Now I recommend if you are wanting the sandwich bread for all week, or you want to slice it all at once, or you want to create thin sandwich slices, you really want this bread to sit for several hours to cool down. I prefer overnight for really good structure to be solidified. So you can see these 2 loaves of bread. Actually, this one I cut just about a few hours after it was cooled. And this second loaf, I actually was able to cut the whole thing without as much resistance and with it having a better structure and not wiggling as much on the next day. I really hope you enjoyed this sandwich bread. This is so delicious. And I make another recipe that's whole wheat Japanese milk bread, which is with sourdough. It's delicious. But actually, there's people in my household who actually prefer this one to that one. So I hope that you try this one. And if you're looking for more sourdough help recipes, then make sure you subscribe to my channel. And I appreciate it if you would give this video a like and share with a friend who wants to make some healthier sandwich bread for their family. I hope you have a great day and continue connecting with people through bread.